Mutine, adjective. Used to describe an individual whose spirit is unyielding, unconstrained, one who navigates life on their own terms, effortlessly. They do not always show up on time, but when they arrive, you notice. An individual confident in their contradictions. They know the rules, but behave as if they do not exist. Mutine, the new fragrance by Miu Miu, defined by you.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Hey, I'm Candice Lim.
And I'm Kate Lindsay. And you're listening to ICYMI.
In case you missed it.
Slate's podcast about internet culture. And I can't believe I'm asking you this. I never thought there'd be a day where I'd start an episode asking you this. But did you catch Jimmy Kimmel's recent monologue?
Who's that?
Oh,
just
fair
kidding.
enough.
I did not watch Jimmy Kimmel's broadcast live, nor did I watch it on a TV screen, but did I watch it on my phone, on YouTube? Absolutely, I did.
This is a real sign of the times of that things are not as they should be when I'm opening up YouTube and typing in Jimmy Kimmel monologue. Then this is no shade to the man. I just can't think of a time in my life when I've needed to see a monologue of his so badly that I seek it out. But I was, of course, very interested to see what he would have to say upon his return to TV after being taken down after comments he made about Charlie Kirk's death.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were waiting with bated breath to see what he would say now that he's back on the air. I would love to play a clip that just kind of evokes the tone that he came into this with.
I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is, you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man.
And that's a very emotional clip and it's very serious, but the only thing I can think of when I hear it and when I listen to the whole monologue is what if me in 2024 was beamed this clip? I would have no idea what happened. It's not that this would kill a Victorian child. This would kill me. And it is just a testament to how much things have shifted in the past year.
Yeah, and it would probably make you ask, how did we get here, right? Because look, even though the Jimmy Kimmel issue is kind of resolved, he's back on air, he's still putting out a show. I would say that this has really opened up a much larger conversation about attacks on free speech. And there's been so many great people writing about this. One of those people is Kat Tenbarge over at Spitfire News. She wrote this piece. It's called, "Is Anyone Going to Defend Free Speech Online?" I would love to read a great line from it where she says, "One thing I haven't seen people freaking out about enough over the past year, and especially now that Donald Trump's administration has quadrupled down on limiting speech, is how the internet is being censored in front of our very eyes, with restrictions on speech coming into effect and materializing on a daily basis."
So after the break, Kat breaks down these sneaky attacks on free speech online and later shares how we can fight back.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. I love the quality of Mint Mobile's wireless service in comparison to my old provider. I save so much thanks to Mint Mobile on a monthly basis, and I take so many calls from work to the gym to the beach, and guess what? Those calls never drop. So, ditch overpriced wireless and their jaw-dropping monthly bills, unexpected overages, and hidden fees. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/ICYMI. That's mintmobile.com/ICYMI. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 per month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. And we're back. Joining us today is an internet culture reporter behind the wonderful newsletter Spitfire News. It's Kat Tenbarge. Hello, Kat.
Hello. So glad to be back.
We're so glad to have you. Now, the note we bring you back into the house for, a little dire. Not exactly galer, but hey, this is what we do. All right. Today we're talking because you have written several really great pieces about just the state of free speech, censorship online, this kind of weird apex we're in, especially post Charlie Kirk's death and kind of the memes and reactions and online reactions that have happened since. So maybe, Kat, let's start with just like how you have been feeling about the past 2 weeks as someone online, and just what have you been thinking about, especially when it comes to censorship and the free speech of it all?
Yeah, I think like everything that you just said are kind of a lot of the thoughts that I've been thinking as well. And from the moment that I first found out about the shooting, I had this kind of like weird feeling of apprehension around what was going to happen next, because the first thing that stands out to me about Charlie Kirk personally is that he's an influencer. Right. And I think influencer culture converges with sort of the norms around speech and expression in a big way, because today influencers are the biggest celebrities that there are. So like, for example, with previous examples of political violence, even previous political assassinations of actual sitting government officials, you don't get the same level of response, in large part because today's elected politicians are not nearly as famous or well-known or influential or really, I think, approachable to people as influencers. And even if someone didn't know who Charlie Kirk was before this happened, which I don't think a lot of people do, the way that his image was like presented to the world afterwards was very carefully curated to have that sort of approachability and accessibility and aspirational quality that influencers almost inherently have to embody. So people weren't treating him as Charlie Kirk, the far-right political provocateur. They were treating him as Charlie Kirk, a loving husband and father who was struck down by political violence because he spoke his mind and people disagreed with him. And so that sort of narrative building is really powerful in a way that political violence isn't always. It immediately struck me as like, this is going to be a big watershed moment. And some of that will be forced on the population, as we've seen with the entire power of the federal government, like trying to make this the biggest thing that's ever happened. But also culturally, I think it was a landmark moment for people. And you see that in the fact that like, I grew up in the Midwest, and a lot of my friends who also grew up in the Midwest were going on Facebook and seeing people who had never even posted a Facebook story before, didn't even know until recently that that was a thing, having a Facebook story. But you have people coming out of the woodwork to make a statement about how the violence and discourse around Charlie Kirk was wrong. And so when you look at speech being suppressed, it can happen through force, like when Reddit forcibly shuts down communities. But I think even more powerfully, it happens through social pressure. So we saw this enormous social pressure to not really speak about Charlie Kirk in a critical way or critically evaluate the situation.
Yeah, like there was a whole kind of crowdsourced attempt to find and identify and then target people. Like supporters of Charlie Kirk were behind this effort to kind of find, identify, and then target people they saw online. They said celebrating Charlie's death, but it really seemed to just be not mourning and posting in a way that they just found that they didn't like, and they would try to get them fired and just dox them. And that was really scary because we are in a weird moment of free speech feeling more tenuous than before. And I think the scariest part is, like you've mentioned, is that like so far a lot of the curtailing of free speech we've just like handed over ourselves without even realizing it. And the Charlie Kirk example is interesting because one of the books we read for our book club was Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. And she mentions in it, and I think this is also what she writes about in her previous book, The Shock Doctrine. But in these moments of shock, often powerful institutions will use them as a way to like push through really aggressive changes for their agenda. And I really think we're seeing that with free speech. But one of the things that you wrote about in your newsletter, Spitfire News, Is Anyone Going to Defend Free Speech Online? Is that this has been happening for a while now. And this is kind of suddenly when it's affecting like Jimmy Kimmel, where we can all see it for what it is. But the first brick was placed, as we would say in TikTok parlance, a long time ago. And so I maybe want to hear, what are some examples of the way that this sort of crackdown on free speech has started creeping in online?
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question. And there are so many things to sort of trace back to. One thing that I think about a lot is FOSTA SESTA, which is something that everyone should know about and be kind of obsessed with. But the reality is almost no one knows about it because it was so like cataclysmic for freedom of speech and expression on the internet. But what FOSTA SESTA was back in 2018. A lot of people remember like Tumblr went from being this like huge force of internet culture online, an extremely popular platform that helped define the culture and the progressiveness of the mid-2010s. And then all of a sudden, like no one was using it anymore. And what happened to Tumblr and what happened to a lot of social media at this point is that legislation like FOSTA SESTA was intended to curb things like sex trafficking. It was intended to crack down on the commercialized sexual abuse, which truly was happening through the internet and with the help of the internet. The internet became a platform for everything. And both ethical and unethical forms of sex work were part of that. But FOSTA SESTA did not have this intended outcome, which was truly more of like a bait and switch, as a lot of this type of legislation is. It's presented as like, oh, we're going to save kids. Oh, we're going to save women from the dangers and evils of sex work. We're going to do all of these great things. But in reality, what it is it's a way to censor and surveil and track free speech online. So as a result of this type of legislation, we've seen this massive crackdown on sexual expression. Sometimes you see it in the way that pornography is restricted, but it extends far, far beyond the boundaries of actual sexually explicit material. So on Tumblr, you had an explicit porn ban that really cratered the site, but you also see this apply to things that conservatives consider pornographic, like trans and LGBTQ identity and information on how to get an abortion and a woman wearing a swimsuit that's a little too provocative. Like, this stuff happens all the time. Women will get their Instagram account permanently banned because they wore a swimsuit and their post was mistakenly flagged as sexually explicit content promoting sex trafficking. Like, I've covered this. Other journalists have covered this. It's a huge problem that doesn't get a lot of attention in the same way that you kind of see this conversation open up, rightfully so, around someone like Jimmy Kimmel. But Jimmy Kimmel, rightfully so, is already back on the air. And the little people who are hurt by censorship and this continued crackdown on free expression oftentimes do not get back on, quote unquote, the air. You don't get your Instagram account back, which maybe became your small business and your community and your way of connecting with the world. You might be pushed off these platforms. Like, sex workers in particular deal with this all the time in forms of like, you might not be able to open a bank account. You might not be able to get a lease on a house because of these issues that start from free speech and expression online.
Yeah, and we should note that FOSTA, SESTA, these are two bills in the House and Senate that became law in 2018. FOSTA stands for Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act. SESTA stands for Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act. And the reason why you are rightfully linking this idea of like protect the children with censorship online is because a lot of the legislation really loves to put this blanket of like, we're banning, let's say, pornography to protect the kids, right? But the thing is, what is behind that, right? There is always kind of this subtler agenda, and that agenda tends to be censorship, suppression, this question of like free speech online. And I did actually learned about a new bill thanks to your reporting, the Anti-Corruption of Public Morals Act in Michigan. I mean, do you want to explain this? Because I can't believe this. I can't believe what Michigan's trying to do here.
Yes. And what this proposed bill would do is it would ban all pornography, and it would also expand the definition of pornography, which, to be clear, has never had a great, super firm definition to begin with. Famously, I know it when I see it.
Right, exactly.
And so this legislation would expand it to include things like ASMR videos.
Which, can we note, Kat, you have a history in?
I was going to bring this up too. I did not know.
I didn't know it either.
Are you currently an ASMR artist?
I'm not, but I would love to go back to it in the future.
Please do.
But
oh my God.
my peak of doing ASMR was like 700 subscribers on YouTube.
But still, oh my God. And well, because that's the thing, and this is a whole other podcast, but ASMR artists in particular have had to struggle with this reputation of being sexual or being portrayed as sexual or believed to be sexual this whole time. And they're not. Like,
right.
It's just for, I mean, it's for all hosts of things, but it's for relaxation.
Yes. Like you can find videos on porn sites that use ASMR, but it's kind of counterintuitive because what ASMR is supposed to do is like help you fall asleep.
Right. Not get to it.
Exactly.
And look, like I've seen videos that are like, pretend you're studying with Conrad Fisher from The Summer I Turned Pretty. And as someone who knows the character deeply, trust me, all I hear are pencils, okay? Pencils.
But what you're saying is interesting because, you know, how these are presented with what's happening in Michigan or the Kids Online Safety Act that is currently being bounced around. All these things, they have the stated goals of like, we don't want to expose minors to sexual content. And like anyone hearing that is like, well, neither do I. Great, we're all aligned. But then you find out that it's these definitions of what's sexual that are actually purposefully being warped to target marginalized communities like sex workers or the LGBTQ plus community. That is another thing that's gotten swept under this umbrella, which is just any content about being anything other than heterosexual is suddenly innately sexual content, which is like another stigma that's followed the LGBTQ plus community for decades.
Yep. Yes. And this kind of like steady roll of legislation to me bears a lot of similarities to what we've seen happen with abortion rights over the past several decades. Because like this Michigan bill probably isn't going to get very far. Like a lot of these bills, especially ones that are introduced at the state or local level, they're not even necessarily intended to get that far. It's more about pushing boundaries. And that is what we saw with the eventually very successful movement to undo Roe. Is it started with stuff that sounded crazy, like no one's ever going to go for that. And it is stuff that is ultimately super, super unpopular. Like this is not an actual majority-led movement. This is like a targeted campaign to erode rights that everyone has and everyone wants, which is exactly what happened with abortion. And it's no surprise that some of the stuff that's currently under attack, I know Abortion Every Day just reported on this last week, like Meta is already censoring information about how to access an abortion legally. So like all this above board stuff that conservatives don't like, they can use their web censorship legislation to undo and censor and hide this stuff. And they don't even need the legislation to pass because big tech companies like Meta comply in advance. So they're going beyond the letter of the law that hasn't even passed because they are doing all this stuff in advance because ultimately it also benefits them.
Right.
And you see a lot of people say like, oh, well, COSA is about undermining big tech. It's about holding big tech accountable for the harms that have been done to children. And big tech has done a lot of harm to children and should be held accountable. But this type of legislation doesn't actually do that. It benefits them because it helps them monopolize the web.
Right. They use it to like Trojan horse.
Yeah.
Yes.
A thing that everyone would ostensibly agree with. And then they're like, but also you don't get to talk about this thing that I've just decided I don't like.
Yeah.
Well, and this is like such a huge topic. And so in our discussions, both now and before this, I feel like this sort of slow erosion of free speech online comes down to like a few different buckets. And so there's this like legislative bucket of, like you're saying, just slowly chipping away. There is what we're already doing by kind of self-censoring each other. And then there is the role of these tech companies. And so that was one of the things I had down, is that right now we're in a state where all this stuff is being explicitly said. So some examples are like there's social media surveillance now happening for visa approvals. And Marco Rubio said that the U.S. will deport visa holders who celebrated Kirk's killing, like things that are these huge overreaches. And then there's the really like explicit decisions that tech companies are making, like what you mentioned, Instagram kind of going above and beyond with sensitive content and ultimately censoring just basic LGBTQ plus information. But there's also been, up until this point, a part of all of this that has been algorithms. And I think that is the one that's very sneaky and that we haven't realized has been kind of suppressing information from us for a while. And the two things I think of, one, back in 2020, there was something called a blackout on TikTok where Black creators were had changed their profile pictures in protest, being like, we post the same content as white creators, but it's just not getting any reach. And their accusation is that the algorithm is not promoting their content the way it promotes white creators. But then all the way up to 2023, when Human Rights Watch published a piece about Meta's broken promises and kind of collated people's lived experiences of attempting to post in support of Palestine and finding that their content was either removed or suppressed. And so it reminds me of this slow chipping away that's happening legally, that's happening with the government, and it's been happening with algorithms where when you're like boiling a frog and then suddenly you're like, they don't notice it, famously. I don't know, I've never been one, but I hear that they don't really notice it as long as it's slowly being turned up. And I feel like we are in that moment where we're like, wait, this is hot. Like, because now we're watching all these things happen that kind of the road was being paved for them to happen for years.
Yep. One thing that this reminds me of a lot that is very interconnected with all of this is what's happening with TikTok. Because TikTok is such a good example of all of these things. And like one of the problems with TikTok was that it's the same problem with any social media platform, which is that these algorithms are black boxes to the point where even people who work at these social media companies don't necessarily know how the algorithms work. But algorithms can be weighted and they can reward certain types of content over others. So like TikTok is a great example because throughout the platform's history, there's always been sort of this active discourse of like, why is this type of content getting more views? Is it because this algorithm, which is controlled by people in China, could be like picking and choosing what Americans can and can't see? And TikTok, of course, disputes this and says that the algorithm is housed in America and is operated on by Americans. But like the source code comes from China. And as we saw this issue work its way through Congress, the idea was like, oh, we're going to ban TikTok or we're going to force China to sell TikTok to someone in the U.S. so that the Chinese government can control what Americans are seeing. People who actually understand this stuff were like, this is a terrible idea. Democrats in particular should not be supporting this. What ended up happening, Joe Biden in his last few days in office, like pushes this through. And now Trump's in office and now TikTok is going to get sold to Trump allies who will have direct control of that algorithm. So you see the way in which like there's a bipartisan push to sort of solidify American government control over algorithms, over what we can and cannot see online, which just looks really bad, not only from the standpoint of like, should the government be able to control what we see online? No, period. But also now that Trump is in power, the Trump administration has been handed this incredible tool with which to carry out things like Project 2025, where all of this is written very explicitly and very clearly. And it was this has been the plan all along.
Yeah.
And we even kind of saw it already happen, like a practice round, if you will, with Twitter being taken over by Elon Musk. And this is from Garbage Day, a newsletter we cite a lot, written by Ryan Broderick. And he's talking about how TikTok is being sold to Trump allies. And he writes, "This is all in line with the MAGA movement's increasingly desperate desire to control information. And I call it desperate because it continues to escalate and become more brazen. It's clear that the big bet of Trump 2.0 is that with an ally installed at Twitter, their favorite social network, they would be able to use it to manipulate the media." And then he later says, "But TikTok quickly became the new hub of American discourse for most normal people, especially women, which is why once Trump's allies are installed at TikTok, you should expect a similar right-wing swarm there and possibly a similar exodus to somewhere else." And so they're literally just watching where people go and installing one of their own in it. And I think that's something, everyone already was losing faith in the TikTok ban ever happening, but I don't think people are quite realizing what this quote unquote like savior of it really means. Like Twitter was a hell site in many ways, but a beloved platform. And a lot of the particularly progressive people on there who left, there hasn't been a replacement, and that's kind of the point.
Yes. When I was reporting on the TikTok ban throughout 2024, this was my personal worst case scenario that I would bring up as like, this could be the outcome. And the fact that I could figure that out. Reporting on tech policy and learning about it is a curse because you realize that there are so few people paying attention, period.
Yeah.
And that of the ones who are, so many have got it completely backwards. And you just have this tiny minority who's like screaming at the top of their lungs, like, we are headed for a really dark place. And the lesson to be taken from Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter and his transformation of it into X is that was a success. Like, they won because most people did not leave Twitter. They stayed for X. And you still have a lot of people on X. And X is a propaganda chamber.
Yeah.
An official propaganda arm of not only the modern conservative movement and at points in time the Trump administration, but it's also been used to try to sway people internationally. And so it's kind of terrifying, like, what Twitter has become. But the problem is, going back to like the frog boiling in the pot metaphor, people who are still on Twitter today don't see it that way.
Yeah.
Like, people who are still on Twitter are like, well, I'm seeing my stuff about Taylor Swift and I'm seeing my stuff about Letterboxd, and like, that's what I want, and I don't want to leave. Leaving would be annoying. It would be an inconvenience. And that's also exactly what's going to happen with new TikTok, is people are going to be like, well, I'm still seeing stuff I like on here and it still benefits me, so why would I leave? And it's just like slowly, the internet itself is turned into an overall conservative echo chamber.
We'll return to our conversation with Kat after one more quick break.
Everyone can use a little help to shape the direction of their lives, from fitness routines to mental resilience or navigating personal goals to tackling burnout. That's what the Life Kit podcast from NPR is here to do. If you're looking to move with more intention or just need thoughtful guidance on living better, Life Kit delivers strategies to help you make meaningful, sustainable change. Life Kit offers real stories, relevant insights, and clear takeaways to help you meet those large and small decision-making moments with confidence and clarity. Trusted voices and expert advice can help take you to the next step, however big or small. Listen to Life Kit to hear thoughtful conversations that unpack the emotional and practical side of personal wellness, along with actionable guidance you can actually use. No fluff, no judgment. Get help tackling common issues like relationships, finances, parenting, and your career. Then walk away with a game plan you can implement right away. Life Kit isn't just another podcast about self-improvement. It's about understanding how to live a little better starting now. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks Fifth Avenue makes it easy to get creative with your personal style and find the best arrivals for fall. I love going through Saks.com because it is so easy to find new arrivals from my favorite designers, and I get a lot of inspiration for my personal style. With fall coming up, I think it's time for reinvention. I think it's time for a wardrobe refresh. So I've been going on Saks.com because I have my eye on a few Jenny Kane sweaters, and thank God they have them all in stock. But that's my experience with Saks.com. There's so much more to explore based on your personal style and what you're looking for. So this fall, whether you're trying out the latest fashion trends or curating a closet that stands the test of time, Saks has you covered. Whether it's a date night, a vacation, a special occasion, or just lounging in style, Saks helps you find the perfect look for every occasion. If you want shopping to be fun and easy, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day.
Life can get a little crazy at times, so if you're looking for a natural way to unwind that can also relieve aches and discomfort, it might be time to try CBD gummies from Cornbread Hemp. Cornbread Hemp CBD gummies are made to help you feel better, whether it's stress, discomfort, or just needing a little relaxation. Designed to help relieve discomfort, stress, and sleeplessness, Cornbread Hemp CBD gummies are formulated to work with your body, not against it. And they only use the best parts of the hemp plant, the flower, for the purest and most potent CBD. All products are third-party lab tested and USDA organic to ensure safety and purity. And with Cornbread Hemp, you can count on fast shipping and reliable customer service. Right now, ICYMI listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/ICYMI and use code ICYMI at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/ICYMI, code ICYMI.
And we're back. So, Kat, I've been thinking a lot about how meme culture has inevitably gotten caught in the crosshairs of online censorship and, how that censorship has sometimes played out as consequences offline, too. I'm thinking back in June, there was a Norwegian tourist who claimed he was detained for having a J.D. Vance meme on his phone. I'm thinking about people getting fired from their jobs for posting about Charlie Kirk's death. What are your thoughts about how meme culture plays into all of this?
100%. And I feel like people who have worked in, like, for example, the media, I think will understand sort of what's happening here because we have been kind of like people who have been online talking about news in public-facing roles and are governed by, like, standards for social media and expectations for social media understand that, like, if you work at CNN, you have to be very careful about the way that you tweet. Mm-hmm. But normal people who have accounts that aren't even their real name, have never had to deal with this standard or norm or expectation of behavior before. And so over the past few decades, we've seen the internet morph into like a wild west of discourse where, of course, when a public figure dies, you can make a meme about it because that is how we communicate. And I think about how in recent years, we've seen this tension emerge between these institutions like the mainstream media, like academia, like government, and with the way that people have now been molded and socialized to communicate about the deaths of institutional figures. So, for example, when Queen Elizabeth died, when Queen Elizabeth died, we saw some of this tension that I think we're now seeing tenfold with Charlie Kirk start to emerge, where like people on the internet were like celebrating the death of course, old age. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a murder, right. But nonetheless, she died and people were going nuts celebrating. There were all of the jokes about Trisha Paytas's baby being...
I was waiting for the moment.
Yes, you saw some of those jokes about Charlie Kirk as well.
Oh my God, yeah. Trisha, close your legs, girl.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So you saw the Trisha Paytas reincarnation meme has taken an international position of importance in how we talk about the deaths of influential figures, which is crazy. But then also at the time, I remember there being a real double standard for how people were reacting to the death of the Queen, because you would see entire stadiums in like Ireland where everyone was chanting along "Lizzie's in a box." That was like a viral moment, and it was a real life, quote unquote, like offline example of this discourse. But at the same time, you saw, I remember Bill Ackman.
Yeah.
I remember he directed a lot of harassment and sort of blowback against Black female posters, like Black women who were posting about this and about how like obviously the colonization that happened under her reign had this impact, this generational impact of violence and terror. And yet we were seeing that speech be subjected to this kind of crackdown. And Bill Ackman couldn't do anything. He couldn't he couldn't take anyone's passport. He couldn't get this person specifically fired from her job necessarily. But that was kind of like an early example of particularly like conservative power, but also you see this happen in a bipartisan fashion where people at the top of the institutions are really mad that social media has given everybody a voice to specifically mock and make fun of them. And like Elon Musk is another great example of this, where it's like we've seen this man do all of this over the fact that people made fun of him and didn't like him. And with regards to Charlie Kirk, I think this is the first time that they've been really successful at being like, we are going to use the full might of the U.S. federal government, and we're going to create this like whole social display of shaming for anyone who does not treat one of our own figures with the respect that we want people to like hold them with.
Yeah. Well, and what you're mentioning, like people chanting in Ireland and this clash, or not even clash, this weird combination of internet language and IRL events. It's, people are getting their claws into free speech in the internet online, but the internet is showing up more and more in real life. I'm thinking specifically, so we have the JD Vance meme getting someone sent right back to Norway, and it's just a picture of like JD Vance with a huge head. Like it's like where it is nothing crazy. Or, there's the fact that Luigi had such a digital he's not Cher. Luigi Mangione had such a robust digital footprint. You could literally watch him go down this, I don't even want to say rabbit hole, but you can watch what happened and how his thinking changed based on his own injury. And then when it comes to the Charlie Kirk shooter, we haven't mentioned yet, there were literal memes inscribed on the bullets.
Yeah.
And those memes are not like lolcat. I mean, that's such an old reference. That's like basically just as obscure.
Yeah. And by the way, we should shout out What Next TBD. They did a wonderful episode with Ryan Broderick from Garbage Day about just like how specifically old school the memes were on the bullet casings, but also how difficult it is, therefore, to really understand the political motivations of said shooter, who I have to say, like at this point in the timeline, the Charlie Kirk shooting, it happened over 2 weeks ago. At this point, we had known so much about Luigi Mangione. Goodreads, his Reddit history, and we know so little about Charlie Kirk's shooter. And yet, they are looking at things like, what memes was he into as like fact, as evidence,
Well, the thing about those memes is some of them are very niche, and like already it's hard to explain memes to any person in real life. But you see the official having to read out at a press conference the ridiculous phrases that are on these bullets, and it's such a weird thing. And so for me, I wonder, so my initial thought was like, it feels like this lack of understanding of the internet is perhaps a driver in just trying to clamp down on it, of like, I don't understand what any of this is, but it seems to be people being rude to me, so I'm getting rid of it. But then I also don't want to contribute to this narrative that like, oh, these people are so stupid about the internet, they don't know what they're doing. Like, do you think, I think no one can decide, like, how savvy are the people enacting these, at tech companies, we can put that to the side because obviously it's their product, but like in the government making these choices, like how savvy are they about what it is they're doing?
That's such a great question. And it's like one thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about the memes on the bullet casings is like communication with memes is hard to parse almost by design because meme language involves so much irony and it involves layers of irony. And part of the gimmick is you don't know how ironic someone is being when they deploy this type of language. And I don't think that is inherently new to memes. It's just that it becomes so confusing to an outside perspective in a way that like manifestos are maybe easier to parse than like this language that you don't even recognize.
Yeah.
And it's also, there was a great article about this by Adam Boumas, the researcher for Garbage Day, which was like, like no one knows what it means to be terminally online anymore because now everyone is terminally online. Yeah. Your mom and dad are terminally online. They might not understand exactly like what they're doing there or like they don't have the context for the environments that they're in. But now everyone is online for the most part. And savviness is like shifting in terms of what that even means. And I think that like it's easy for people who grew up online to feel like they understand everything about the internet. But even that's not true. Yeah. Because the internet is so wide and so massive. And I think a lot of what's going on here is you see these figures who had traditional power, who maybe struggled to acquire power as it exists online today, or are simply just like cannot get over the fact that they can't control how people feel about them and talk about them on the internet. This is one of the defining tensions of this era is like people who come from traditional hierarchies who literally just like lose it. Yeah. They lose their minds over the fact that the internet can show them how everyone really feels about them. And for anyone who has any sort of like micro platform or macro platform, like we all kind of understand this once it happens to us. The first time you see someone say something about you online that isn't true and you don't even know this person is a very destabilizing thing. The first time you get a hate comment, the first 100 times you get a hate comment, it's a very destabilizing thing. And I can see how it creates this sort of confusion and this desire for power and control. But at the end of the day, it's like, despite how sympathetic I may be to individuals, the problem is now the government is like reacting in this way. And Trump himself has gone up, and like people don't listen to Trump in ways where I'm like, we should probably pay attention to him. I know it sounds ridiculous, but he's the president. But like he was signing some internet legislation several months ago. And the legislation is supposed to be helpful to victims of deepfake sexual abuse. Right. And Trump was signing this on the White House lawn, and he was talking about how people online are mean to him, and he's hopeful that this legislation can help him stop those people. So like they will say it out loud. Like they want to be able to shut down their critics and they're going to use the guise of like protecting people online to do so.
Yeah. And then it's so crazy. I'm just like thinking about that. But one of the other things your piece brought up, because this is sort of the clusterfuck we're in right now, the like, oh, it's hot moment we're having has like so many sides coming together. And I think the last one that was, I didn't even realize until I read your piece, but it's so right, is, and it's another way in which we unknowingly kind of aid this, which is the rhetoric around social media right now is like, I need to get off, I need to touch grass. Like a line you wrote in your piece, people think it will somehow be a good thing if the government forces us off our devices so we can go play outside with each other. And it's like, it would be great if we were outside more, but it did make me think like, if we all get offline, we can't connect really. I mean, and the way that we were able to connect IRL before has been like decimated both by social media and things like the pandemic and how we gather. Like we would have no way to organize, and that was a real like light bulb moment for me, because I would say I'm very much on the side of like everyone log off, delete Twitter, change your screen time. But so then I think what is, I don't know if inspiring is too strong a word for this moment, but something that is a good reminder right now is that it's actually like not just important to stay engaged, but it's effective. And I'm thinking again of Jimmy Kimmel, where, you know, his show was taken off air. There was an uprising. He's back on air, even though he was brought back but not put on all the stations he's normally on because there was still some defiance within the companies that air him. He still broke a record for people watching his return. And then if you go on YouTube, his monologue, this is as of right now, and I'm sure this number will grow, is at like 26 million. It's one of his most viewed monologues. It is very much like everything they did to silence his speech ended up making him be heard by like more people than ever before. And that is powerful, even though the moment feels hopeless.
Yes. And I I am constantly of two minds about this because on one hand, I am someone who is like, I wish that I read more books instead of spending all this time on Reddit. But that's the career.
Yeah.
I'm like, being on Reddit has made me who I am today, but also I wish I could unplug more. But I really fear, and Taylor Lorenz is someone who talks about this a lot, like the rhetoric that we have is more powerful than we think. So when everyone in sort of almost a bipartisan, quote unquote apolitical fashion is like, we should all stop going on our phones and the internet is the problem and the internet is ruining everything and it's the phones. But that's not the whole truth. And when we say that kind of stuff, we obscure so much of what is happening that needs to be like a 5-alarm fire. Like, we need freedom of speech online. It's not a want. Like, we will lose our access to each other and we will lose access to vital information. And it is a huge fundamental parts of our rights is the way that we show up and can communicate and speak with each other freely online. And so, like, it's so easy to just be like, if I put down my phone, everything will get better. But that's not actually true. The phone just tells you what's happening in the news, and the news is the problem.
Yeah.
So I do think that, like, and I feel this way too about sort of like puritanical culture and some of the ways that like young feminists will talk about, like Sabrina Carpenter. It's like we're missing the forest for the trees. Like, I think what is really important, what I wish people would take away from this moment is like the reason our speech online is under threat is because our speech online is so powerful. And like, yes, there is a lot of nuance here. Yes, there is a lot of critique here. But also, like, the internet has been such a tool for democracy.
Yeah.
And it's been a tool for, like, anti-democracy when it's in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
So we actually need to keep it in our hands.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my question. Like, it's a when, not if, it seems that TikTok is in control or is controlled by Trump allies. Is it our American duty to stay on it?
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, like where do you fall? Because I left Twitter. I said, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to support the man in charge of this. But at the same time, I did kind of do exactly what they want, which, not that my voice was like some amazing, powerful thing. But again, like, don't diminish yourself.
Yeah.
I'm talking to myself. Like, don't diminish your own importance on these places. And so I guess I'll stay. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I do think the funny irony of this is, like, Kat, truly, I really think what you wrote kind of changed my mind about this too, where I was like, especially after Charlie Kirk's death, when the video of his murder was just like flooding every timeline. I feel so exhausted and traumatized, frankly, from his murder and so many others that are circulating, that to me, I was like, doesn't it make sense that everyone wants to log off? Because, like, how much pain can I really take before I am worn down and I just cut the cord? But in a weird way, like, what you're writing did motivate me to be like, no, lock in. No, lock in. Because, like you're saying, putting down the phone does not change what happens within it. And I think what is different, especially with the Jimmy Kimmel thing, is like a lot of people online were like, look, I want to support Jimmy Kimmel, therefore I will cancel my Hulu and Disney. And they were so proud. It was productive activism. It was a call and response. And it kind of worked, right? Like, Disney did see the drop in subscribers, the loss in money, and they're like, great, let's bring them back. However, the battle between the internet and censorship is not only something that's been going on for a while, it will continue to go on for a while. I can see a lot of people, including myself, being burnt out covering it, trying to fight it. Like, in your opinion, do you think there is anything we can do to fight the internet's war with censorship, like, on an individual level? And also, like, why? Like, why should we try to fight it?
Yes. So I do think that there are things that we can do, and there are organizations and groups that are building coalitions right now. One of the really great ones that I come back to a lot is Fight for the Future, and they have a group of, like, teens and young people who are actively fighting COSA as just one example of, like, there is stuff we can do on an individual level, particularly when you look at the legislative approach to censorship. It doesn't take that much pushback to cause a commotion because most people are not involved in the legislative process at all. Most people vote, if that, and that is the only sort of, like, political activism or participation that they engage with. So like any political participation is already like a step ahead. And groups like Fight for the Future and also like the Electronic Frontier Foundation are on these issues and are very good on these issues. I also think that like on an individual level, we should all care because it's almost like people forget the ways that the internet is actually important to them. So much of the rhetoric is like screen time is bad for us. The internet has made us all worse in all of these different ways. We forget the way that it's also made us better. And I think a lot of people even hearing that would be like, what do you mean? Like, how has the internet helped me? But it's like, I know for me personally, like the internet brought me so much of the political identity that I cherish today. Like going back to early 2010s Tumblr, which flourished because the internet was freer in the early 2010s. And so progressivism took root and like flourished. And what we're seeing now is that the internet has become conservative in nature, but that's not because the internet is fundamentally bad. It's because the people who have power on the internet right now are conservative, and all of this is by design. And so there are things we can do on small individual levels to fight back. But I'll also say that, like, should I get off Twitter is like a common way that people sort of distill this down. And it's like, for me, that was the answer. Like getting off Twitter, not posting there anymore. That was, for me, the right thing to do. But any choice you make is always going to be a double bind where it's like you will lose things and you will gain things. And there's never going to be like, it really does come down to the individual. Like, what do I want to do? But I wish more people would not post on Twitter because I think that like collectively we could weaken it as a platform if we moved our cultural discourse elsewhere. And there's no easy way to do that. Like, there are alternatives, but there's no one-to-one alternative for what Twitter was. But I do think that, like, even if people were just more cognizant and aware of these things, I think it would shift the terrain in a big way.
Yeah, that's where, when I think about this moment, and I think it's just because, like, I'm in media, we're all in media, so this might be a little inside baseball, but I do think it's important because, like, it is a really bad time. You know, the platforms are controlled by people with motives we don't trust. The media institutions, like traditional media, are susceptible to pressure from people we don't trust. It is a real moment of not trusting anything online, which is so dangerous. And again, the point. But if we want... So I think we have a responsibility to each other to be really thoughtful and discerning about our own sharing of information, because I'm thinking like, okay, if we don't trust the media, we can, one of the great tools of social media is how we can pass news around, but with such distrust, we will be lacking the journalistic like reporting that confirms these stories. And so, and already misinformation is so want to go super viral. And I think the thing I think it's important to advocate for is developing a habit of understanding when you're on these, like, basically, if you're going to be skeptical of the mainstream media right now because of the pressure they're under, which is fair, you need to be just as skeptical as like the TikTok comment telling you something that is like a piece of news that sounds correct or satisfying. Like, when I say do your own research, I don't mean in a vaccine way. I mean like in a little like, wait, let me make sure if this actually is a real thing, like a real headline, or like this is actually something that someone posted. Like it's a little counterintuitive, but I think especially right now when trust is so low and like what reality even is, I think it's really important to, and you owe it to yourself as well, to like not fill your brain with bullshit.
Yes. And the thing about institutional distrust is that it's not wrong. It usually comes from a place that is like people are failed by their institutions, and that's why they don't trust them. The problem is the alternatives to these institutions are not necessarily better. And in fact, they are frequently worse. You see that with media. You see that with medicine. Like, you see the way that it is so easy for people to get sucked down these pipelines because they are looking for answers. And it's hard to like evaluate things. But that's why like institutions and institutional knowledge are not the same thing. And like I think that people tend to be like the entire media or the entire medical establishment. And it's like, actually, there are sources of authority that you can trust. So like, let's start there. And like, maybe not every mainstream media outlet, and in fact, I would argue they aren't all doing a perfect job all the time. We should criticize them. We should critique them. But if you abandon the principles of media, now you don't even know what journalism is.
Yeah.
So it's like I think people need to do more work to be more literate in these areas. And I understand why they don't, because work is hard.
Work sucks.
Yeah.
But so does not having free speech. Okay, that's the show. If you want to hear more from Kat, you can go read her work over on SpitfireNews.com. And if you want to check out more Slate coverage of this issue beyond just Jimmy Kimmel, you can head on over to What Next? Their guest, Karen Attia, talks about her own firing from the Washington Post after her reaction to Charlie Kirk's death. Unlike Jimmy Kimmel, however, she has not returned to work. So once you're done with our episode, head on over to the What Next feed to listen.
ICYMI is produced by Vic Whitley-Berry, Kate Lindsay, and me, Candice Lim. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer. Mia Lobel is Slate's executive producer of podcasts. And Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. See you online,
where we promise to never shut up.
ABC Wednesday, Shifting Gears is back.
He has arisen.
Tim Allen and Kat Dennings return in television's #1 new comedy.
What?
With a star-studded premiere including Jenna Elfman, Nancy Travis, and...
Hey, buddy!
a big home improvement reunion.
Welcome.
Oh, boy.
That guy's a tool.
Shifting Gears, season premiere Wednesday, 8/7 Central on ABC, and stream on Hulu.
Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.